Iran and Hezbollah are in a tough spot because, like, what do you do with this bellicose state that won't accept any accommodation? They won't accept a ceasefire. They won't grant Palestinians their minimal rights. They constantly break agreements. They constantly assassinate the top negotiators. This is not the first time Israel's killed somebody from Hamas who was carrying out negotiations.
Salah al-Rouri.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. What do you do? What do you do with a state like this? But at the same time, neither Iran or Hezbollah want a war with Israel. In the case of Hezbollah, they can do damage to Israel, but they know that Israel's already said, if Hezbollah attacks us, we're going to use disproportionate force, which means we're not going to punish Hezbollah. We're going to punish the civilians of Lebanon. So Hezbollah has to factor that into their decisions. Like, they're not just fighting with an army that obeys, some semblance of the rules. They're dealing with an army that is openly dedicated to punishing civilians and killing large numbers of them. And Hezbollah has to factor that into their decisions.
And so Israel has announced, on that note, that it will carry out disproportionate violence against the civilians of Lebanon if Hezbollah attacks. This is according to Barak Ravid at Axios. It says scoop. I don't know why he says scoop. It should say stenography, or Yoav Gallant told me this, because Barak Ravid is just a channel for the Israeli military security apparatus. But it's still valuable to have that. They think that they can say things like this through him rather than just announcing it at a press conference. And so here's the background here. First of all, let's consider this in light of the new $3.5 billion military aid package to Israel and all the justifications that have been made by the State Department for sending heavy weapons to Israel, 500 and 2,000-pound bombs, is that Israel needs to fight Hezbollah, and these aren't for Gaza, where they're actually being dropped on civilian homes. Now Israel's openly saying, we're going to take those bombs, and we're not actually going to use them against Hezbollah because we can't defeat them. But we have this thing called the Dahiya Doctrine. It's named after a civilian neighborhood, a Shia area in southern Beirut that we destroyed in 2006. And the entire doctrine centers on attacking civilians because we can't defeat our militant group opponents. And hopefully those civilians will get so demoralized and so upset that they'll turn on their leadership and agree to be pacified and agree to our program. And then, someday they'll just be like the UAE and they'll work with us and we'll just control the whole region. That's the whole point of this. So all those bombs are going to be dropped on Beirut. There are tons of Americans. I have American friends there who are Lebanese, people I grew up with, and they're all going to have to pay the U.S. government to evacuate them, while the U.S. government is basically giving their tax dollars to Israel to bomb them. That's the arrangement that American citizens of Lebanon get. Now, this announcement was triggered by an article in Al-Akhbar, Lebanese paper, which is pro-resistance, which was supposedly disclosing Hezbollah's plans for the attack. And here's an interesting part of this article. Israeli officials interpreted the article in Al-Akhbar as saying the target for Hezbollah's response could be the IDF headquarters in the center of Tel Aviv, or the Mossad headquarters and other key intelligence bases in northern Tel Aviv. And then, thank you for this, Barak Ravid. This is actually really useful. It's a point that me and Aaron have been making for years. The bases are all close to civilian neighborhoods, and if a rocket were to miss them, it would likely harm civilians. So in other words, Israel is the ultimate exploiter of human shields. Israel's entire population has been turned into human shields. And particularly in North Tel Aviv, where you have the Hakiria complex, that is the nerve center of the genocide and the assault across the region, bombing civilian targets across Lebanon all day today, killing a Hamas official in southern Lebanon. That is just, that area it's right next to the Azrieli Mall, the largest shopping mall in Israel. I used to like eat lunch when I was, working around there in the neighborhood, and there would just be like uniformed officers coming in to eat lunch next to civilians. Are they human shields, those civilians? By Israel's definition, yes. So they're setting the stage for saying, oh, Hezbollah, by attacking military targets and missing, has justified us deliberately attacking civilian targets, not even attempting to attack military targets, and killing thousands and thousands of people in Lebanon and creating a humanitarian catastrophe. And the U.S. is not not setting red lines.
Like, instead of using the moment after Hania was killed as a moment to say, all right, look, Israel carried out, like even from the point of view of like Biden administration propaganda, they could have said, all right, Israel carried out a major goal. They decapitated a political leader of Hamas. Now it's time for a ceasefire. Instead, they just rushed more military weaponry to Israel. And they sit by as Israel threatens to kill, disproportionately civilians in Lebanon. They're doing everything they can to encourage the escalation that they claim that they want to avoid. And, I wonder, I don't assume that Hezbollah and Iran are going to retaliate in some heavy manner. I mean, we've already seen them back in April. They basically did everything they could to avoid a war by telegraphing exactly what they were going to do. I don't know if they're under more pressure. I mean, they probably are under more pressure this time because Israel keeps crossing their red lines. And in this case, they carried out a really brazen attack in Tehran, killing Ismail Haniyeh. On the other hand, no Iranians were killed in that attack. And so maybe from Iran's point of view, that might lead them to think, all right, it's not worth risking the ire of this like demonic, insane state. But, I don't envy the people who have to make these decisions because you're dealing with a government that has just no respect for any concept of the law, obviously, and is willing to is willing to use civilians in huge numbers to achieve their goals, to kill large numbers of civilians, as they've shown in Gaza and everywhere else they've attacked, including Lebanon.
What Iran wants and needs is deterrence. It wants to establish deterrence without going above the threshold of total war. It wants to maintain this, and same with Hezbollah. They want to remain below the threshold of all-out war, and it's not working. They're unable to establish deterrence. Iran was unable to establish deterrence with its choreographed attack on the Al-Assad U.S. base in Iraq in response to the U.S. assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And Iran was again unable to establish deterrence with another telegraphed attack, not choreographed, telegraphed attack on Israel. And so it's now at a really decisive moment. How can they establish deterrence? And they know they can't trust the United States to deter Israel or to rein Israel in. So how can they establish deterrence? How can they prevent something like this from happening again, which was so humiliating, while their scientists are being assassinated inside their country by Mossad and the MEK, their MEK proxies? And the reality is, and this is the message Israel's sending, you either go all the way or you don't go at all. Because they're going to continue to use disproportionate force. And go ahead.
Well, and this is all Israel does. This is the only thing that they know how to do. Their entire existence, all they do is they escalate until their foes have to respond. Like the 1967 war, what precedes that is like months and months and months of Israel shelling over into Syria, trying to get a Syrian response that Israel could then use as a pretext to take over not only the Golan Heights, but the West Bank, Gaza, and the Sinai. And finally, in 1967, after Israel shells Syria enough, Egypt gets concerned about this and moves their forces in an attempt to deter Israel, not only from attacking Egypt, but also from stopping attacking Syria. And what does Israel do instead? They use the mobilization of Egyptian forces as a pretext to attack Egypt and steal all of this land, including the West Bank and Gaza. 1982, before Israel invades Lebanon, for like over a year, they're constantly shelling Lebanon, trying to get a response from the PLO, which is based there. And why were they doing that? Because the PLO was becoming more, quote unquote, moderate in its orientation. It was starting to just accept a Palestinian surrender, basically, of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel doesn't want that because it wants to take over as much Palestinian land as it wants. It doesn't want to recognize minimal Palestinian rights. So after like a long time of shelling, finally, they get one retaliation from the PLO, and they use an assassination of an Israeli official, which the PLO was not even involved in, as the pretext to go and destroy Lebanon. And that's when they get Hezbollah. That's why Hezbollah exists, is because Israel invaded them. So this is, and same, same thing with 2008, the day Obama is elected, they bomb Gaza, breaking a ceasefire that Hamas was observing, and that triggers a new Israeli massacre inside Gaza that goes on up until Obama's inauguration. So this is all they know how to do. And obviously Nasrallah knows this and doesn't want to give them an excuse to deploy this playbook again and destroy much of Lebanon, which Israel really wants an excuse to do.
And the incident in Majd al-Shams in the occupied Golan Heights, the occupied Syrian Golan Heights, in a Druze village, in which a missile struck and killed 12 youth on a soccer field, injured many more, needs to be seen in light of all of those incidents that you elucidated that triggered regional wars, because this was the incident that Israel used to assassinate a key Hezbollah official and then go into Iran and kill Haniya and move towards regional war. And if you talk to people in that village, they're not clear that this was a Hezbollah rocket. Many of them say they believe it was actually an Israeli, either Iron Dome misfire or a deliberate false flag attack. And Israel hasn't really produced a lot of evidence to demonstrate that it was a Hezbollah rocket. So why does Israel want to have a regional war when it's pretty clear that it cannot withstand an all-out attack from the resistance axis, Iran and all of its allies, when it's unable to defeat Hamas, when even a CNN investigation has shown that Israel has failed to deplete most of Hamas's battalions despite their claims to have triumphed? Why? Because their goal is to draw the U.S. in directly, to draw it in to a direct confrontation with Iran. That's what Israel wants to do. And it's succeeding so far. And it's succeeding under a democratic administration with someone who's so poorly versed on foreign policy that she's unwilling to give an interview, likely to enter the White House, who's married to her AIPAC handler, or Donald Trump, whose son-in-law effectively gets the Israel portfolio, who is literally in bed with Benjamin Netanyahu when he was a boy. The Kushner family of Jared Kushner is where Benjamin Netanyahu would stay on trips to New York, and he'd sleep in Jared Kushner's bed, and Jared Kushner would get up and go sleep on the couch. Israel is so confident, knowing that it cannot survive 1 second without its direct line to the Gentile authority in Washington, that the U.S. will defend it no matter what. And as soon as that relationship changes, as soon as U.S. citizens are able to alter that relationship, then things start to change in the region and genocide becomes less likely. And that's your task if you're in the U.S., is to work to change that relationship.